Okay, welcome back. We hope you had a pleasant lunch and stuff like that, a break or a walk or whatever. It gives us great pleasure to welcome Aqeeb to start off the afternoon session. Welcome, Aqeeb.
Hello.
You're going to talk to us about, well, hacking, really, and getting footholds in targets and that kind of stuff. So without any further ado, over to you, Aqeeb.
Yeah, so hello, everyone. My name's Aqeeb Hussain. And as Mike has introduced, today we're going to be talking about the first steps of gaining an initial foothold on your target. So let's make a start. So just a quick who am I? So as mentioned, I'm Aqeeb Hussain. I study in Northumbria University. I'm doing a Masters of Computing in Computer Network Cybersecurity. My background is mainly in Linux technologies. So I've done a year of industry, have dealt with different types of Linux distros. Most of my interests are in offensive security, penetration testing, and that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today as to, how to gain a foothold and look at the red team aspect of it all. So just before we really get into the presentation, I just want to go over a quick plan of what's going to happen. So first of all, I'm going to talk about how to gain a foothold on your target, and then moving on to some actual tools that you could use and some actual techniques. And from that point, we're then going to be looking at some considerations you should make when you're gathering information. And once all the talking's done, I'm then going to show a live, not a live, but a pre-recorded demonstration, which is going to showcase some tools and actually talk about the different approaches, which I'll be theoretically talking about first. Also got a slide at the end for anybody who kind of wants to know a bit more, pick up some more tricks, and maybe learn some new things. So let's get down to it. So to start off, what is an initial foothold? Well, to introduce an initial foothold, I first of all want to discuss the image on the left, which is what we call a cyber kill chain. Now, created by Lockheed Martin in 2016, I think, also referred to as the intrusion kill chain. It's basically a set of steps which an advanced persistent threat or an advanced attacker would use to exploit a system. Now, when it comes to gaining a foothold, the first kind of step would be reconnaissance, and that's where gaining a foothold is. So what we sometimes call recon, that's the shortened version for reconnaissance. In practical terms, recon consists of a few things, such as, looking for open services, which you can exploit as an attacker, versions of software, so outdated versions, updated versions, port numbers which are open, maybe filtered, and that then helps us to map out any potential vulnerabilities. So then moving on to detecting services. So you've first of all got port numbers, you've got the versions, now you need to move on to the next step. So you're detecting the services, you're probing them with certain packets, and then that helps you to move on to the next step, which would be exploitation. Now, I know within the diagram, you'll see in weaponization and delivery, but when you're dealing with network devices, such as maybe servers, so we're talking remote servers, email servers, the weaponization and delivery steps kind of get wrapped into the exploitation phase because it depends on what payload you've got and how you decide to deliver that. So I haven't really gone into the actual meaning of the word reconnaissance, which is something that I really want to talk about. So the actual meaning of the word reconnaissance is derived from the military. So it's all about observation and scoping out an area. So in this case, as red teamers, you want to perform reconnaissance on a target where you're essentially trying to figure out, the ins and outs of your target, what's open, what's closed, what are your entry points, what are your, what are parts that you shouldn't be going to. So that kind of sums up what reconnaissance is. And now I want to talk about some of the key tools that I've got listed. So talking from personal experience, Nmap has to be the #1 tool when it comes to recon. There's a few reasons I'm calling it the #1 tool. It's because it's packed with additional scripts. It's got a additional component attached to it known as the NSE, the Nmap scripting engine, which I'll be getting into in my demo. And with Nmap, you can get as much information on your target as possible, which then helps you to basically get exploitation steps done. The next tool is Netcat. So Netcat's generally more useful when it comes to having your exploit ready. You know, you've sent an exploit, you then want to catch a connection. So such a scenario would be basically, that would be classed as getting a reverse shell. But Netcat can also be used in things like port scanning, and similar to Nmap, it is done for port. It can be used for port scanning, but the good thing about Ncat, or Netcat as we call it, is that it generates far less traffic. Now, the other two tools which I'm going to mention here, Nikto and GoBuster, they're more directed to a web penetration testing scenario. So from previous experiences which I've had with kind of red team and stuff, you know, by engaging in labs and stuff like that, I could confidently say that most VMs or CTFs or any kind of, you know, hack the box machines you may come across, there's always going to be an element of a web server. So it's always important to know how to tackle a web server. So that's why I've included two really good tools. So that you've got Nikto, where you can, Nikto is basically a tool which is written in Perl, and Nikto has the ability to basically identify vulnerabilities and gain information on a website. So it'll, you know, basically scan a web server and then tell you the vulnerabilities. And then you've got GoBuster. GoBuster brute forces a website, gives you all the file paths, and that's usually useful when there's hidden file paths, there's hidden files, or there's even hidden domains if we're talking about maybe virtual hosts on the server. So now moving on to the next part, which is now you've got to make a choice here. Now, based on your rules of engagement and even your personal preference, what do you do? Do you go fully aggressive or do you stay under the radar? Now, it's a choice that you need to make, but each choice will have its own results. So being aggressive, which is quite literally full frontal assault, you know, going through the front door, you will have a lot of information as a result. And, you know, the more information you get from your reconnaissance, the better chance you've got of accurately exploiting your target. Now, the downside of something like that is that it generates a lot of traffic. So if you've got network defenses, so let's put this in an example. Let's say we've got an SSH server. Now, an SSH server may have some defenses like fail to ban. And if you're trying to send too many requests to the SSH server, you've got yourself blocked. You've blocked yourself from a network defense, whilst trying to, you know, possibly recon a service or exploit a service. You've got yourself blocked and you've made yourself known. On the other hand, you could go for stealth recon. Now, stealth recon would be less information gained initially, but it would mean more steps. You could still achieve the same thing that you would with aggressive recon. You just need to take more steps. And I believe with stealth recon, it's more directed towards hardened systems. So if there's firewalls, if there's an intrusion detection system, you want to apply stealth recon. You don't want to make yourself known. And just one more disadvantage about aggressive recon before I move on. Aggressive reconnaissance does have that element of causing a denial of service. Now, you as an InfoSec professional, you need to take into consideration what you do could cause damage to your target. Now, if it's not in the rules of engagement, then, you know, then that's not exactly the best idea. So let's say you've got, as I said earlier, let's say you've got an SSH server. Let's say that's on production. You knock out that SSH server, you've then caused a denial of service for your client. So being aggressive, yes, it's good. It creates a lot of, generates a lot of output for you. But if you don't do it carefully, then you're causing yourself more trouble than you're causing yourself more benefits. So as I said at the beginning, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what I'm gonna about some of the tools, some of the approaches, and kind of some of the things. And now what I'm gonna do is I've got a pre-recorded demonstration. So just to give you an overview, I'm gonna be looking at aggressive tactics. So how does a how does a attacker aggressively scan a machine? How do they stealthily scan a machine? And on the other hand, looking at some more tools, so searchsploit, which I'll be explaining in my demo, but just just to give you some oversight now, it's just an offline vulnerability database where you can confirm if a target's vulnerable or if a certain version. Looking at some manual reconnaissance, that's always important whenever you're looking at hardened targets. Hardened targets are not the types to just broadcast information. You really need to get in deep into the target and really look hard. And looking at netcat, how does a scan of netcat compare to nmap, and TCP dump, looking at how you would look at such traffic. So let's move on to the video. First of all, introducing the use of aggressive nmap scanning. So nmap is a great tool in both ways. It can be used very aggressively, or it can be used in the stealthiest ways possible. Now, first of all, I'm going to show the aggressive use of nmap and how you can benefit from an aggressive scan and how much information you can get from it. So first of all, I'm going to put the switches in, and then I'll explain each one by one so that you can gain a better understanding of what you're looking at. And you can also use these kind of methods and techniques in your own pen tests. So starting off, nmap -sc, which is a default scripts. So nmap is armed with a scripting engine known as NSE, also called the nmap scripting engine. Now, the nmap scripting engine is almost an additional component which makes nmap much stronger and kind of gives it a lot more capabilities. So that means your reconnaissance will be a lot better. SV, version detection. So when nmap attaches to a port, it's able to detect versions because you've given it that option. -ST, you're doing a full TCP connection. You're not trying anything sneaky. You don't really care about any of that. -N, which is no DNS. So we are connecting to an IP address and we're not connecting to a host name. -T5, which is the highest possible timing you could use with an nmap scan. -VV. Verbose switches can, I think, go up to at least 5. So from personal experience, using too many verbose switches can be a bad idea because then you're almost getting redundant information that you just don't really care about. -VV is good enough to kind of give you a live update of what ports are open. -P-, so the first port on the box, so port 1 to port 65535. That's the maximum port on the TCP stack on any machine. And of course the IP address of my target. So I'll run this, and as you can see, there's a lot of information there, a lot of open ports. So if we just quickly decipher the output, 151 scripts for scanning. Of course, it's telling us what the nmap scripting engine is doing, and it's giving us the open ports. Now, when it comes to an aggressive scan, I've just had a TCP dump running there. Now, TCP dump is just an equivalent of Wireshark. It's a terminal version where you can kind of use TCP dump to live track, track traffic live when it's being sent across the wire. So just quickly explain the switches again. -VV is verbose. -XX is basically how the information is displayed here. -I is the interface. So I'm using ETH0 for mine, and the host filter. Now think of this traffic. Think of this in terms of stealth factors. Now, let's say you've got a network administrator on the other side, or let's say you've got port scanning defenses. Now, for those of you who've done a bit of pen testing before, who've come across things like port scan detection, you'll see that as soon as you send too many packets, the port will shut down and your Nmap scan is basically worthless. Now, the reason there's so many packets being sent right now is because, well, there's been so many packets being sent because you've got so much. Nmap is sending so many packets because there's so much version detection. There's a lot of work going on in the background of Nmap, which means there has to be a lot of traffic sent. So you can already see IMAP S is one of the open ports, is getting a lot of packets thrown at it because there's so much information that Nmap is sending to it and it's getting back at the same time. Now, that's live tracking the information going over the wire. Now, these scans can go on for a long time, which is why I've already done the scan. And what I'll do is I'll quickly decipher the output file and move on to the stealth side. So, in terms of open ports, we've got 53 open, we've got DNS, we've got a few email servers, we've got a Samba share, and we've got an HTTP server running, which also, as you can see, there's been a bit of brute forcing going on here because it's found some directories. Now, this information is very good for us because now we know exactly what services are open, we know which services to target, and we've also got version numbers that we can kind of use in terms of searching for exploits. So it would be too soon. It might be too soon at this stage to search for exploits. But of course, if you find specific version numbers, there's a really good tool called Searchsploit, which can help you to find specific versions, public available exploits. So 4.3.11. Now, I can run Searchsploit. Searchsploit is an offline database which is available on every Kali Linux machine. Well, every Kali Linux machine I've used. In case you use one, it's not available, then you'll come back and say, no, it wasn't available. So, from the machines that I've used, it's available, but if it's not available, just do apt install exploit db. Of course, if you're not root, and by the way, never run a Linux box using root, bad idea, just me being me. Of course, if you're not root, sudo is what applies, and exploit db should get you sorted. Anyway, Searchsploit. Now, put the exact number in of the exploit. Now, GNU bash, right, okay. So I was to do Samba. Again, there we go. So we've got an exploit of is known pipe n. Again, if I wanted to go to that exploit, if I wanted to read it, if I wanted to pull it, all I need to go user share exploit db Linux. Sorry, 1 second. Exploits. Been a while since I used exploit db. Remote 420. Yeah. So this is a Metasploit script. Now, whether it applies to this machine or not, you'd have to read the exploit, you'd have to understand it, then you'd have to fire it off. But my point being, if you're ever coming across version numbers, Searchsploit's a really good resource to turn to. Now, moving on to the stealth aspects of Nmap. Nmap, like I said, is really good when it comes to using stealth techniques. So you can use Nmap in such a way where you're basically being a little more sneakier with Nmap, and you're not going through the front door guns blazing. You're employing some techniques which could bypass network defenses, but there's no guarantees. Some of these techniques will get caught by modern day defenses, but not every defense will catch this. So Nmap SS, which is a SYN scan. So a SYN scan is what we call a half-open connection. When a TCP connection happens, what happens is a three-way handshake. You send a connection, you receive a connection back, the connection's then closed. What you do with a SYN scan, you send a connection, you get a response, but with the way the packet is crafted, it's designed in such a way that the connection never closes, therefore it's not logged. It's considered stealthy, but modern day IDSs like Snort, intrusion detection systems, can't catch it. But again, don't get disheartened by that because not everyone's using Snort. Minus T2, that's slow timing. So again, you know, you don't want to fire too many packets at once. Like you saw, there was so many packets being sent before. You want to be a bit slower. You want to hide in plain sight. Minus MTU. Now what this is maximum transmission unit, and what we call this is packet fragmentation. Packet fragmentation is when we minimize the size of packets and we send smaller packets so that they could pass under the radar. Minus VV, again, like you saw before, verbose. Now, a bit more of a targeted scan, so we're not basically ripping the stack apart, the TCP stack apart in terms of ports. We're going for specific ports. Now, run that and quickly go back on TCP dump. You can already see that the packets being fired are not, it's not going berserk this time. There's, you know, there's a steady pace of packets and ports that are being probed. Now, already you got a result back, so, you know, there's less information there, but at the same time, you've left a much smaller footprint. So, like what, as you already saw, the packets were not going as fast. It's definitely not 31,000. That's the previous capture included. So you've now saw the stealth uses of Nmap, the aggressive uses of Nmap. Now, one thing I want to stress is Nmap can be a tool. Nmap is such a good tool that you can rely too much on it. Now, what you don't want to do is rely too much on Nmap. Put yourself in a situation where Nmap isn't available. What do you do then? You're either in big trouble because you rely too much on it, or you're absolutely fine because you don't rely too much on Nmap and you've got other ways around it. Now, if you don't have other ways around just using Nmap, well, you will by the end of this demo. So, one of the tools which I like to use to be a bit more stealthier and to produce less traffic than Nmap itself is a tool called Netcat. Now, Netcat is just generally known for being a network administration tool, but you can use it for kind of port scans and stuff like that. So I'm going to repeat or recreate this Nmap scan. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run it through Netcat. So I'm going to use some, I'm going to use the kind of bash shell to do some Netcat scripts. Not Netcat script. Well, it's almost like a for loop to use Netcat. So just quickly explaining what I'm doing. What I'm doing is I'm doing NVVZ, which is a port scan, so no DNS, fully verbose. You want 0 IO mode, which is a port scan. You want a timeout, 3 seconds each time. You want the IP address of your target. You want $I. And again, to be a little bit, tad bit stealthier, you probably want to add a 5-second sleep switch. Go done. Now let's kind of wait for that on, let's kind of watch that happen on the TCP dump capture. So you can already see packets are being sent one by one by one by one. So 5 seconds, another 5, another 5, and another 5. And you can already see ports open. So less noise, slower, less packets being generated, but you're still getting some information. Now, you don't have Nmap to give you information, but at the same time, there are tools which you can use to manually connect to these services. So I'm going to quickly run an example then. So 8080 is open. Now, a common tool that you can use is wget to connect to any web server out there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use wget, or I can use curl, whichever is based on preference. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use wget -q to kind of really quieten the output, and -s to extract the headers. So what I'm going to do now is, I forgot the port number. What I'm going to do now is, as you can see, Nmap, in the Nmap scan, the aggressive nmap scan somewhere here. It told me it's running Apache 1.1, yeah? Now, just using wget, I can get the same information just by sending a normal HTTP request and not using nmap and risking being caught by nmap. I can go a step further, so now I know it's running Apache Coyote 1.1. I can then... No, I didn't want to do that. I can then use curl. What I can then do is I can basically read the web page using curl, or I can manually go to the web page using curl. So I know it's now using it's using Tomcat 7. Now from this point, I can also use other tools such as SMB client. So I know that the server is running a Samba share, so I can just directly connect to it and start probing it manually. Now, all this probing's being done manually, you're producing less traffic, and you're not relying on just a tool to do your reconnaissance. So there are workarounds, and I hope you learned something from this demonstration. Thank you very much. First of all, so I hope that talk was, I hope the demo was definitely helpful and informative to you all. And now let's talk about some things which I feel are important, definitely if you're progressing in red teaming. The first thing I want to emphasize, definitely emphasize so much is take your time when you're doing your recon. Doing your recon is think of it like an 80-20 rule. 80% reconnaissance, 20% 20% of exploitation. And now from that point, you then want to think about, try to learn a scripting language from that point. So Python, Bash, you know, if you're doing nmap scans all the time, if you're doing Nikto scans all the time, if you're doing these kind of things all the time, you're just going to waste your time doing them all the time. So automate that, move on to manual recon. The third part is use a proxy server. So this is more for web apps, but it's still applicable to any kind of pen testing you do. So use a proxy server to intercept requests, use a proxy server to modify them, and essentially you can keep a track of everything from that point. Just a quick trick. If you ever wondered how to identify an OS without doing too much active reconnaissance and active probing, ping the machine. And once you ping the machine, you'll see a TTL value. The TTL value should be 640128. And of course, if you want to learn further, ensure that you are looking at things like HPing3 and SCAPI. Those two are certainly good things to use. So that's about it from me. I really do hope I gave you some food for thought and definitely, you know, gave you some things which you can learn and all the rest. And thank you very much. Do take care.
Thank you, Aqeeb. Brilliant, nice detail there. Excellent stuff. Some really good feedback in the Twitch. So we are out of time. If anybody has any questions for Aqeeb, please drop them in our Slack, which I'm sure one of our colleagues will drop the link to in Twitch. But again, Aqeeb, brilliant job. You did the right thing. Pre-recorded the demo. Nothing can go wrong, right? Appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Cheers, mate.